South Carolina's biggest wealth story may not be happening in Charleston, Columbia, or even Greenville. It is happening in smaller communities where expensive homes are appearing behind live oaks, along golf courses, beside lakes, and on barrier islands that barely look large enough to register on a national map. Today, we are counting down 10 small South Carolina towns that are increasingly attracting affluent buyers, retirees, executives, entrepreneurs, and people with enough money to choose lifestyle over location. There is one important distinction. Nobody publishes a public database showing exactly how many millionaires move into each South Carolina town every year. So this countdown is not pretending one exists. Instead, we are following the evidence wealthy migration tends to leave behind: rapid population growth, unusually high household incomes, luxury home activity, expensive second home markets, and communities where high-end buyers are becoming increasingly visible. That larger migration trend is real. South Carolina's population grew about 8.8% between 2020 and 2025. It reached roughly 5.57 million people. IRS migration data also tracks large flows of households and adjusted gross income across state lines. But some places on this list are changing much faster than the state around them. One town has grown more than 50% since 2020. Another has a median household income above $140,000. And near the top, we will reach a tiny coastal community where the typical luxury transaction is measured not in hundreds of thousands of dollars, but in millions. We begin in the Upstate. Number 10. Travelers Rest. The name itself sounds like a place designed to make people slow down. Travelers Rest sits north of Greenville. It is close enough to benefit from one of South Carolina's strongest metropolitan economies, but it still offers something wealthy buyers increasingly value: breathing room. For years, people might have treated Travelers Rest as a gateway to the mountains. Now the town itself is becoming the destination. Its estimated population reached about 9,135 in 2025. That was up roughly 17% from its 2020 base. More than 42% of adults aged 25 and older hold at least a bachelor's degree. Housing offers another clue. Zillow placed the typical home value around $358,000 in June 2026. But Redfin's more recent sales measure showed a median near $523,000 over the 3 months ending in May. Different slices of this small market can produce very different numbers. And that difference matters. Travelers Rest is not becoming a millionaire enclave from one end of town to the other. Its attraction is that affluent buyers can reach upscale communities, mountain recreation, and Greenville. And they can do it without paying coastal island prices. For somebody leaving a more expensive metro area, that can feel like an enormous upgrade without looking extravagant. Travelers Rest represents the quieter side of wealth migration. Not mansions behind gates. At least, not everywhere. Just people with more purchasing power discovering a town before the rest of the country starts calling it expensive. Number 9. Aiken. Aiken tells a completely different story. Here, money is not new. It has been arriving for generations. The city became famous for its equestrian culture, its winter visitors, its thoroughbred connections, its polo, and the enormous Hitchcock Woods. That identity still shapes Aiken today. It gives the city an atmosphere that feels partly southern small town and partly old money sporting retreat. Aiken's estimated population reached roughly 33,800 in 2025. Nearly 29% of residents are 65 or older. That age profile helps explain part of its modern appeal. For affluent retirees, Aiken offers something coastal resort towns increasingly struggle to provide: character and prestige without requiring a multi-million-dollar oceanfront purchase. The median value of owner-occupied housing from 2020 through 2024 was about $286,800. That is far below what we will encounter later in this countdown. That is exactly why Aiken belongs here. Wealthy buyers do not always chase the most expensive zip code. Sometimes they chase land, privacy, horses, mature trees, a historic downtown, and a community where having money does not automatically require displaying it. Aiken's wealth story is less about explosive growth and more about continuity. It is a place where an affluent newcomer can arrive and discover that wealthy outsiders have been doing essentially the same thing for a very long time. Number 8. Fort Mill. Now the pace changes dramatically. Fort Mill is where South Carolina's small-town identity collides with the economic gravity of Charlotte. In 2020, Fort Mill had about 24,500 residents. By 2025, the Census Bureau estimated nearly 38,700. That is growth of almost 58% in only 5 years. And between 2024 and 2025 alone, Fort Mill grew about 6.8%. That placed it among the fastest-growing U.S. communities of its size. This is not simply retirement migration. Fort Mill attracts working households with substantial incomes. Its median household income for 2020 through 2024 was approximately $121,800. Think about what that combination means. You have a South Carolina town with access to a major banking and corporate center, growing neighborhoods, families with six-figure household incomes, and tens of thousands of new residents arriving within a relatively short period. Fort Mill may not look like old money South Carolina. That is precisely the point. This is new wealth, corporate wealth, professional wealth, dual-income households exchanging a major metro address for more space just across the state line. And as more high earners make that decision, yesterday's suburb can become tomorrow's high-income destination. The first 3 towns show 3 very different versions of the same trend: upstate lifestyle wealth, old equestrian wealth, and Charlotte-driven professional wealth. But number 7 takes the income story even further. Number 7, Tega Cay. Tega Cay is easy to overlook on a map. That becomes much harder once you look at the numbers. The city had an estimated population of about 14,500 in 2025. That was up roughly 13% from its 2020 base. But population is not the number that makes Tega Cay stand out. Income does. Between 2020 and 2024, the median household income was approximately $142,000. Per capita income was more than $66,000. The poverty rate was estimated at just 1.5%. Those are remarkable numbers for a community this small. Tega Cay benefits from the same Charlotte area economic engine as Fort Mill, but its personality is different. Its Lake Wylie setting gives residents the kind of lifestyle wealthy suburban buyers frequently search for: water, recreation, attractive neighborhoods, and access to metropolitan employment without living in the center of a major city. And there is an important lesson here. Millionaire migration does not always produce mansions on an oceanfront road. Sometimes it produces communities where a large concentration of successful professionals simply earns far more than the surrounding region. That is what makes Tega Cay worth watching. The wealth is not hidden behind a resort gate. It is woven into everyday suburban life. Number 6, Hilton Head Island. Hilton Head is hardly unknown, but its permanent population tells a different story from its tourism reputation. The town had about 38,200 residents in 2025. An extraordinary 39% of the population was 65 or older. The Census Bureau estimated the median value of owner-occupied homes at roughly $687,000 for the 2020 through 2024 period. By June 2026, Zillow placed the typical Hilton Head home value around $790,000. So Hilton Head is not simply a beach destination. It is a major retirement and second home ecosystem: golf communities, marina access, established neighborhoods, restaurants, beaches, and recreational infrastructure. Together, they give wealthy buyers something difficult to reproduce from scratch. And that established reputation matters. A buyer relocating with significant assets may not want to gamble on whether a new destination will eventually develop the services they expect. Hilton Head already has them. That creates a different kind of wealth magnet. mature rather than emerging. Of course, popularity brings complications. Higher property values are part of the equation. Insurance exposure is part of the equation. And the pressures of coastal development are part of the equation. The island's growth has also raised difficult questions about land preservation and the future of historic Gullah communities. So Hilton Head shows both sides of affluent migration. New money can strengthen a real estate market. It can also change who is able to remain there. Number 5. Seabrook Island. Now we move from famous to intentionally private. Seabrook Island sits southwest of Charleston. It has built much of its appeal around controlled coastal living. Golf, racket sports, equestrian facilities, ocean access, and enough separation from Charleston to feel removed without being truly isolated. The real estate numbers make its target market clear. Zillow estimated the typical Seabrook Island home value at just over $1.04 million in June 2026. That million-dollar threshold changes the character of a market. It does not mean every homeowner is a millionaire, but it does mean purchasing power becomes a major filter for entry. Seabrook also demonstrates something important about wealthy migration in South Carolina. Not every affluent buyer wants Charleston nightlife. Some are purchasing the ability to avoid it. They want controlled access, recreation, nature, and privacy. They may be retired. They may work remotely. They may use the house only part of the year. But their money still enters the local property market. And because island land cannot be reproduced somewhere else, scarcity becomes part of the attraction. If this list is showing you anything, it is that South Carolina is not attracting just one type of wealthy newcomer. Some want cities nearby. Others are paying specifically to keep the city at a distance. And number 4 may be the clearest example of how quickly luxury development can transform an ordinary town name into an international high-end brand. Number 4. Bluffton. Bluffton may be one of the most important wealth migration stories in the state. Its population was around 27,700 in 2020. The Census Bureau estimated roughly 36,800 residents by 2025. That is growth of about 33% in 5 years. Per capita income for 2020 through 2024 was more than $63,000. Almost 1/4 of Bluffton residents were 65 or older. But ordinary town averages hide what is happening at the extreme upper end. Inside the Bluffton area sits Palmetto Bluff. It is an affluent master plan community that has become a world of its own. Median home values there increased from roughly $2.1 million in June 2021 to about $3.19 million in 2026. Through June 16, 2026, the community recorded 103 closed sales. That was roughly 40% more than during the comparable period a year earlier. That is not subtle. It is a visible concentration of capital. But Bluffton's growth also produces the contradiction that makes the town so interesting. It still markets the Lowcountry feeling people came looking for. Live oaks, water, porches, and slower rhythms. Yet every new luxury development risks making that atmosphere more expensive to access. Bluffton is trying to sell something that growth itself can gradually alter. That tension is why it ranks this high. And now we reach the top 3. Here, a million-dollar house stops being extraordinary. Number 3. Isle of Palms. Cross toward the Atlantic from Charleston. The price scale changes quickly. Isle of Palms is a small barrier island community where beachfront access and proximity to Charleston collide. And wealthy buyers pay heavily for that combination. As of June 2026, Zillow estimated the typical home value around $1.73 million. Its median sale price in May was approximately $1.54 million. Redfin used a different measurement window. It reported a median sale price around $1.8 million over the 3 months ending in May 2026. Different methodology. Same conclusion. This is expensive territory. Yet Isle of Palms feels very different from a traditional wealthy suburb. There are beach houses, vacation properties, and second homes mixed into a community that can still feel relaxed and informal. That combination is powerful. Affluent buyers increasingly want luxury without formality. They want to walk outside in sandals, reach the beach in minutes, and still be close enough to Charleston for restaurants, culture, and an airport. The catch is obvious. When normal transactions rise well above $1 million, ordinary buyers can become spectators. Isle of Palms is not attracting wealth because it is affordable. It attracts wealth because wealthy households can afford what everyone else wants: scarcity, water, and location. But even this market looks almost restrained compared with number 2. Number 2. Sullivan's Island. Sullivan's Island does something few wealthy communities manage. It feels understated while being extraordinarily expensive. The island is only about 3.5 miles long. There are no stoplights. Commercial development is limited, and there are only roughly 1,100 residences. Yet in February 2026, its median home listing price stood around $4.9 million. That made its zip code the most expensive housing market in South Carolina by that measure: $4.9 million. For the median listing. That tells you almost everything you need to know about who can realistically enter this market. And Sullivan's Island has another advantage: affluent buyers constantly seek but cannot manufacture. Proximity without density. Downtown Charleston can be reached relatively quickly. But once you return to the island, the environment feels residential and protected. That scarcity creates enormous leverage. You cannot build another Sullivan's Island. You cannot create another shoreline in the same location. You cannot suddenly add thousands of houses without destroying the thing buyers are paying to obtain. So wealthy households compete for a limited number of opportunities. That is why Sullivan's Island represents one of the purest forms of modern luxury. Not more stuff, but less access for everyone else. And yet it is still number 2. Because one South Carolina town combines exclusivity, golf, resort prestige, natural beauty, and a luxury housing market operating at an almost different economic altitude. Number 1. Kiawah Island. Kiawah Island is where the phrase wealth migration stops sounding like a YouTube title. It starts looking like a real estate business model. At first glance, Kiawah's appeal is obvious. Oceanfront land, maritime forest, golf, privacy, resort amenities, and access to Charleston without having to live in Charleston. But look at the property market. During the first half of 2025, single-family transactions commonly occupied the $2 million to $5 million range. Properties above $5 million continued attracting strong demand. Homesite median prices rose sharply during that period. They reached about $1.1 million. Then came 2025 as a whole. Kiawah recorded about $851 million in total island-wide sales volume. That was the third highest year in its history. And in 2026, an oceanfront property connected to longtime sports agent David Falk came to market at $25 million. The island's previous reported sales record was $20.5 million. That is the open loop from the beginning. The South Carolina town where multi-million-dollar property is not an anomaly at the edge of the market. It is part of the market's identity. Kiawah also explains why this larger movement is happening. People with serious money can live in New York, Miami, Palm Beach, California, or dozens of wealthy suburbs across America. So when they choose a smaller South Carolina community, they are usually not choosing it because they have no alternative. They are choosing something specific: space without total isolation, natural beauty with luxury infrastructure, prestige without a skyscraper skyline, and in many cases, a slower daily rhythm than the metropolitan environments where their wealth may originally have been created. That is why Kiawah deserves number 1. Not because every resident is a millionaire. Not because every wealthy person moving to South Carolina is heading here. but because few places in the state show the intersection of small-town scale and extraordinary purchasing power as clearly. And when you look back at the full countdown, an interesting pattern appears. Travelers Rest is attracting people who want the mountains and Greenville. Fort Mill and Tega Cay benefit from Charlotte's economic orbit. Aiken offers an older tradition of wealth and equestrian life. Hilton Head provides a mature retirement ecosystem. Seabrook sells privacy. Bluffton combines explosive growth with multi-million-dollar enclaves. And the Charleston area islands turn geographic scarcity into one of South Carolina's most valuable commodities. South Carolina's attraction is no longer simply that it is cheaper than New York, California, or Florida. In its most desirable small towns, cheap is disappearing from the conversation entirely. The new selling point is quality of life, and wealthy buyers are proving they are willing to pay for it. That also means local residents face a complicated future. Rising investment can support restaurants, businesses, construction, and property values. But the same money can push housing further out of reach. It can also change communities that people loved precisely because they were small. Growth creates winners. It also creates pressure. So, which of these 10 South Carolina towns would you choose if money were not the issue? And which one do you think wealthy buyers will discover next? Tell us in the comments. And subscribe to our channel for more stories about the towns, trends, and hidden changes reshaping America. Because sometimes the biggest changes are happening in the smallest places.